We looked at the role of news on the brain. And what we found in the first study was that if you consume 3 minutes of negative news first thing in the morning, you increase your chances of having a bad day by 27%. Now, the follow-up study was significantly more hopeful, and that was that if you're not just exposed to problems like most articles are, right? Instead, you go on to look at what could be done about that challenge. So you get your brain to focus on potential or actual solutions. We found that the people in that experimental group that looked at those solutions, they didn't even engage in them. They were actually 20% better at creative problem solving at those tasks that they did later on in the day. So what that tells me is that even opening up the mind to the possibility that we can overcome this challenge, which is basically building higher levels of optimism, it shows us that we will be better and smarter. Our performance will be better later on in the day, whether we're at work or at home. Well, my question is how many of these headlines are actually helpful to us as we make financial decisions? Because my suspicion is, and I'm not a financial advisor, but my suspicion is a lot of this information is actually noise. It doesn't let us necessarily make those best financial decisions. And actually that noise can help keep us away from the information that's the signal, right? That what we really need to know. So that's why having a financial advisor like you is so important, because you have all this institutional knowledge. You have been monitoring this information over the past few decades. And so you have the perspective and wisdom that people can leverage as you say, listen, let me tell you what you really need to pay attention to. It's really only these four things. And this is what's going to help you achieve, the goals that people have set. You can build it at any time. There's actually a fantastic study done with grumpy old pessimists who have been practicing pessimism for 8 decades of their life. Researchers, this is actually from Seligman's team, whom you mentioned earlier, they had them engage in the simple practice of gratitude. So they would write down 3 new and unique things each day that they were grateful for a period of time. And why that's valuable, it's not about the 3 minutes or whatever that it takes you to come up with this list. It's about the whole rest of the day that as your brain scans for those positive things in your life, you're retraining your brain for higher levels of positivity and optimism. So some of the other things that we found is uh, 76% of respondents who classified themselves as optimistic or were classified, right, but based upon their answers, they felt really comfortable discussing money and then putting it into practice. They are extremely or very interested in learning about money management compared to pessimists. And I think that piece, they know that the tools are out there, but maybe they don't know which tool to use. I think that was very interesting. And then the overall willingness to learn as well.
I think that's huge because a lot of times if people are kind of going the other way with their finances, there's a feeling of helplessness and maybe being underwater. And so having that behavior to always want to learn or to know more about it, you said 70, having those optimists, 76% are more comfortable discussing it. So that I think you mentioned earlier, the idea of take the taboo out of money. So this is something that people were openly discussing and communicating about, as opposed to we don't want to talk about.